Hey there, here we are. The neighbor's got a fellow with a pressure washer going on, and we're getting kind of tired of the noise. It's just the wrong pitch to be soothing. All right. In any case, I'm going to walk you through making a Seaforth kilt step by step. This tartan that you see, this particular pallet, I call the Seaforth Centennial because I created this pallet based on my grandfather's kilt from the Great War. He was wearing it when the war started in 1914. I think he joined in 1910 until he was discharged in 1919. It's been carried on through the family. It's in a museum now. But this is the palette. This is the color that his kilt had faded to after 5 years or 4 years on the Western Front. So in any case, I have two kilt lengths of this left, and one of them's bespoke for a piper in the eastern United States. And this, I got an email out of the blue from a former Seaforth Highlander of the British Army, because yes, you have to go to the colonies to get a good kilt these days. He's got his grandson's getting married, and he wants to be dressed in his family tartan, which is to say his regimental tartan. So I've got an 8-yard length. Now, army kilts were usually only 7.5 yards. This is a full 8 yards, and that we're going to use every bit of it because he's got a 46-inch waist, which, I've seen his pictures. In addition to the measurements, according to my measuring instructions, he's also sent me pictures. He's sturdy. He's not fat, but he's got a 46 waist and a 47-inch hip. So I've started, and I'm going to rewrite this because that's kind of messy. I've started just writing 46 and 47 apron pleat. So I start by just splitting it in half. 23 and 23 equals 46. 24, because even if somebody's completely tubular, we still need an A-line in that apron. If it hangs perfectly straight, if there's no A-line, it looks wrong, right? So 24 and 23 equals 27. Well, okay, that's the first thought, but let me go to, let's add an inch to the front apron, 24 and 25, which make this 22 and 22. Because military kilts, particularly Seaforth kilts, have the aprons larger across, wider relative to the pleats, and particularly in a statuesque figure. So 24, 25, okay, but I don't like an even number across the back because it's going to be a non-number of pleats. So let's try that again. 25 and 26 for the apron, 21 and 21. Okay, 26 and 27, 20 and 20, and again, even number, 27 and 28, 19 and 19. I'm going to go with this. An apron that's 25 inches at the waist, 26 inches at the hip, and the pleats are going to be 21 inches at both. Now, even there, we need a bit of an increase, so I would add a 16th. Well, I'll show you as we get further along. So I'm going to go with that, 25 and 26. Great. So the next thing I've done, I've chalked the apron length 22 inches. Now there's some conflicting marks here, sorry, because I was looking at he'd taken his measurements twice. And in one set of measurements he was 21, the second measurement he was 22. I'm going to go with a longer length because if modifications are necessary in the future, I can't put cloth back on. So we're going to go, I've measured from the bottom, there's 22 inches, and then I measure up 2.5 inches, and the fell is 8.5 inches, which takes us right to there. Now, Seaforth kilt, the red line is centered on the front pleat, or front apron. That's not negotiable. That's end of discussion. If it's high-low light infantry, the center of the kilt is here. But there we are. Now, there's going to be a tiny bit of waist cloth here because 12.5 times 2 is 25 to there. I'm not going to get enough material there. There's simply not enough material in the end. So this is the center of my front apron. So I've marked it. As you can see, there's the front of my apron. And now I'm going to go to the other end quickly. And do the same marks. Now the inner apron, it doesn't matter if the center feature of the inner apron is the same as the outer, okay? And by moving it over, centering it on the HLI rather than the Seaforth, as it were, saves me some cloth. It prevents a little bit of waste. So if I've laid out the same markings here, 22 inches, down 2.5, down 8.5, and then out, what did I say, 25 and 26? In any case, so I've laid this out, and there's a comfortable, a little bit less. Usually I do a full hand span, which is about 8 inches. It's a little bit less, but that's good because we're more concerned with maximum number of pleats. So the next thing I do, there is the right hand edge of the inner apron. I'm going to bring it over a bit, because remember, one of the failings, in my opinion, of military kilts is if they have an apron pleat at all, it's very, very tiny and sometimes completely missing. You'll often see an army kilt where, let's imagine this is the last pleat. The inner apron just runs out from underneath it, and that's not good practice. I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to squeeze every bit of worth out of the length of cloth that they've got, but it is kind of cheesy. So I'm going to go over, because remember, to me, the optimum depth of an apron pleat is between 1/4 and 1/3. Well, this is about 1/4, and it takes me to this line because, of course, the Seaforth kilt is box pleated to the white line. Having said that, the first and the last pleats, as I've mentioned elsewhere, the first and the last pleats are knife pleats, which then meet a box pleat. So in this case, and there's another way. There's another method when we're pleating a kilt that isn't a box pleat, which I'll cover in a later video. But in the meantime, very briefly, that other way, this wouldn't be the first pleat. The last pleat. In the other way, when we're pleating to a knife pleat, we find that depth, and this is where the last pleat and the edge of the apron meet in a civilian kilt. But in a military kilt, no, this is going to be a knife pleat followed by box pleats. So I've marked that with my own little shorthand, which is sort of a half of a broad arrow kind of thing, and an X to remind myself that this tells me we're dealing with the edge of the apron. The X tells me this is actually the first pleat. So, and I do this in a bit of a hurry. I'm not going to count the pleats in front of you, but I counted through them, made a note where the middle of the kilt was, red line, not the white line, unfortunately, but that doesn't really matter here, right? And then done the same thing on the front apron, where I've brought it over, so I've got, this is something a little more than a 1/3. Actually, this is about 1/4. Actually, sorry, I'm wrong. This is about 1/3 of the total frontage, which is optimum because, remember, it's going to drape better. When he sits down, he's going to have a little more immediate modesty as the kilt hangs down. And should he grow ever greater or it pass down to a larger descendant, there's a reservoir of cloth there to expand, right? So I made a mark there to show that's the first pleat. Now, having counted the pleats, I've got a whacking 39 pleats here. And I think it's possibly because of that extra half yard of cloth, because a military kilt, a Seaforth kilt, invariably, in my experience, was 31 pleats. So I've got 21 inches, which we have to divide into 39 pleats. Now, because we're pleating to the stripe, the maximum number of pleats, which as I mentioned is 39, is the number that we can actually get. You saw me earlier, we were talking about pleating to the set. We're not going to get that number because we lose a bit as the pattern creeps across the set. So I do my usual breakdown. Well, half of 39 is 19.5 inches. Well, that doesn't work. But if I go up to 5/8, so there's 19.5 inches. If I go up to 5/8, let's add 39 times 8, an eighth of an inch. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 4, 6, 8, 30, 2, 4, 6, 8, 39. That's 24 3/8, which is too big. So let's split the difference, 9/16. So now I'm counting eighths in two. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8, 30, 2, 4, 6, 8, 29. So 21 7/8 plus, which is to say 21 and, what was that in 16ths? 15 16ths. So 21 7/8 plus. That is with an acceptable tolerance of that. So that's what we're going to do. So my pleats are going to be 9/16 minus a tiny little bit at the waist and 9/16 at the hip. And I'm going to achieve that little bit of variance, that little bit of discrepancy between the two. Remember, I went through my box, of gauges, and I pulled out 2 gauges. Well, that's a 1/2 inch, so I'm not going to use that. So there's my 9/16 gauge, which in my own shorthand I sort of describe as 1/2 plus, right? So here's my 9/16, and I'm drawing down here. Here's the finished part of the kilt is going to be up here. Pardon me while I get a sharp piece of chalk. Let me get a sharper piece than that. Okay, pardon me a sec. I'm going to sharpen that piece of chalk. Except I got my sharpener tucked away somewhere, so I'll sharpen it later. But in any case, this is 9/16. So let's measure that. To inside the chalk line, bang on the chalk line, we got 9/16. So what I'm going to do is, there's my first pleat. Let me just measure 22 inches. 2.5 is up, and 8.5. So there's the top of the kilt. There's the center of the buttonhole, the tongue of the buckle, and there's the bottom of the fell. I'm going to mark the next one the same way. Now, the great thing about referring to the elements of the tartan, right, is the bottom falls right on that line. And again, if the measurement was a little off, frankly, I'd cheat a little bit by going to that line because it prevents cumulative error. And there's my center of the buttonhole. There's a little bit of variation here. Okay, I'm going to measure that from the top because that looked a bit odd to me all of a sudden. Trust your eye, listen to your hunches, and if some little niggling part of your subconscious goes, I don't think that's right, stop and pay attention because you're probably bang on the money. The next thing I do, I pull out a strap for reference. Now there's the center. That's the center. So I line the strap on those chalk lines. There's my buttonhole on the second pleat. There's my buttonhole in the first pleat. Now I can put that strap away. So now, as I said, from the center of the buckle to the top of the kilt is going to be 9/16. And I don't need to mark this on every pleat before I tear it, right? But I'm going to mark the first couple. Now, as I said, if we look at the, okay, my chalk marks a little, must have held my chalk at a bit of, yeah, see, I got a bit sloppy there. I held my chalk at a bit of an angle, and I need to sharpen this piece. That's how errors can occur. Instead of drawing it like that, I drew it like that, and I got an incorrect measurement. So for the center the buckle to the top of the kilt. I'm going to be, when I pin this together, I'm going to pin it so that the chalk lines aren't visible by the fold. They're hidden by the fold, right? Like so. And then at the, in fact, I'm just going to do this once just to show you. You're going to be seeing it again further on. Come here, Mr. Pin. So when, and I always pin first at the middle of the buttonhole, second at the top of the kilt, third at the fell, and then a fourth one here. But because we need a tiny bit of taper, even though the measurements are the same, we still need a tiny bit of taper. Where here I've folded it so that the chalk line isn't visible. Here at the fell, or sorry, at the bottom of the fell, I'm folding it so that the chalk lines, both chalk lines are visible. And as I believe I've said elsewhere, sometimes I can fine tune that. If the measurement is that critical and finicky, I'll rotate it cloth so that one of the chalk lines is visible. But in this case, both of the chalk lines. We can be a little bit free and easy at the hip for reasons which I'll explain later. But there we go. So I've chalked the aprons. I've determined where the first and the last pleat is. I've determined the width of each pleat. I have found the gauge, checked it to make sure that my measurements are going to be accurate. Now I can put my chalk away. And then rip to the line. There, so that's the point I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to rip. I'm going to put this away. I haven't talked to the customer yet about how absolutely military traditional he wants this kilt. Does he want the traditional green cloth tape on top, or may I use a tartan top, which is a little bit more posh? We'll find out about that. But in any case, just in case he does want a tartan top band, I've marked that too, which I've explained elsewhere. Make sure that everything will line up proper. So, and there's what I'm probably going to do, because it's just about dinner time and I did this in a bit of a rush. I'm going to walk away from a bit. I'm going to come back and look at it again and go through my plan again to make sure that I haven't in fact made an error, because you can keep on planning, you can keep on figuring things out. You've only committed yourself when you've actually done that rip and started cutting out bits of the cloth. So there we are. We'll assume that I'm absolutely right in this. My next stage will be to rip it down to its proper length, and then I will start preparing the box pleats, which will be the subject of the next video. So thank you.